in Columbia, Missouri, Ryan Ferguson was an ordinary kid who received good grades in school and enjoyed playing sports like soccer, basketball, and tennis. This was all soon to change. On Halloween night of 2001, around 2 a.m., sports editor Kent Heitholt was leaving the Columbia Daily Tribune when he was viciously attacked and murdered. Two janitors were first on the scene, Shauna Ort and Jerry Trump. They could not see anyone until Jerry Trump called out and two men stepped out from behind the car. The man at the rear of the car walked toward Shauna Ort and spoke to her before calmly rejoining the other man and walking away. Ort got a good look at this man, including his face, before he left the scene. She then called 911 at 2:26 a.m. Shauna Ort helped police create a sketch, but Jerry Trump was unable to identify the individuals. Investigators discovered a trail of hair, blood, and fingerprints at the crime scene, and yet the murder of Kent Heitholt remained unsolved for over 2 long years. Then, in 2004, a troubled young man named Chuck Erickson began to talk. Erickson and Ryan Ferguson had gone out to a local bar that night. Ryan clearly remembers the night. The two attended a Halloween party at the bar and then went home. However, Chuck Erickson began to have dreams that he and Ryan were involved in the murder. Eventually, word spread to police. When being questioned, Chuck had no actual independent knowledge of the crime. He didn't know the murder weapon, where the murder took place, or how exactly Kent Heitholt was killed. However, after police fed Chuck the answers to these questions, he would take the stand and remember the events that night. Ryan always claimed his innocence, repetitively telling police that he was never there and had no idea why Chuck was making up this story. In the 2005 trial, Ryan Ferguson stuck to his consistent story. However, Erickson's statements changed a few times. Erickson eventually came to believe his dreams were true, that he and Ryan had murdered Heitholt in a robbery gone wrong. Due to the fear that he must have committed the crime, Erickson panicked and agreed to a plea deal that would frame his friend Ryan for the murder of Heitholt in exchange for a lesser sentence for himself. Since none of the DNA found at the scene matched Ryan, police relied on key witness Jerry Trump. Trump took the stand and pointed to Ferguson, claiming that he was the man he saw in the parking lot that night, even though years earlier he stated he was unable to identify anyone. After just 5 days of evidence, the jury deliberated. Hours later, they delivered their verdict. Ryan Ferguson was guilty of robbery and second-degree murder and would spend the next 40 years behind bars. Ryan was 19 years old at the time. He has been behind bars ever since. Ryan Ferguson is now 28 years old. Since the verdict, Ryan's father, Bill Ferguson, has done everything possible to prove his son's innocence. Since 2005, both Chuck Erickson and Jerry Trump have came forward and confessed to lying under oath. The two main reasons why Ryan Ferguson ended up behind bars in the first place, and now they have confessed that they lied. Until April of 2012, Ryan had no chance of walking out of prison because of the original testimony of Jerry Trump and Chuck Erickson. When Erickson and Trump took the stand in April of 2012 and admitted they lied at Ryan's trial, both men subjected themselves to perjury charges by recanting. This has never happened before in an American courtroom in a habeas hearing. This is the ray of light in Ryan Ferguson's case. There is no case in the United States where the only alleged eyewitnesses recanted in open court. The conviction has been upheld and the person remains incarcerated. In the coming weeks, America will soon find out if Ryan Ferguson will ever receive the justice that he deserves.
You have really no evidence linking him apart from these two key witnesses, both of whom aren't just recanting, they're basically testifying that they perjured themselves.
I don't want to die knowing that this guy's still in prison because of something I said.
Even a janitor who testified he saw Ferguson at the scene has taken his story back.
Do you think in this case of the murdered sports editor that police might have been overly anxious to get a conviction?
And I feel that police were very anxious because Heitholt was a well-known guy that apparently everybody loved and everything, and this was really their first big break in the case 2 years later, whatever it turned out to be, and so they figured that it could be really like a make-or-break case for their...
So, do you think Chuck might have gone in there not really knowing what happened, not asking him what happened, but telling him what happened? Do you think that's the way it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe there was corruption involved here.
See, like, the way they were interrogating him. And you could kind of see desperation in the cops, because it's like, this case has been going on for years and years and years, and there was nothing for them. And then it's like, oh, we finally have a chance. Go, go, go. Come on, we gotta get this done. So, yeah, corruption, almost certainly.
When families go through the normal legal process and they don't get what they consider to be justice, they feel that they've run up against a brick wall. And so they do go to a journalist.
Well, I mean, the police obviously want a conviction, and the people who are on the jury or in the trial, I feel like they kind of want to make sure they're doing the right thing, whereas journalists can be the average person, like a student journalist or even like professional journalism. They're more focused on like the facts, and they can just give like a general, I think, like more broad point of view, whereas I feel like everyone else is kind of like pressured into either picking one side or the other. So I think journalists kind of make it a little bit more fair for everyone.
Often police feel they have a job to do. They have a job to find a criminal, find the person who committed the crime. That's their job. Here comes Chuck Erickson saying he thinks he might have done it. Maybe to them he was a viable suspect.
It seems like there was almost too much pressure to get results and not enough to get, justice. Like, they almost knew that their case was flimsy. That's why they brought in the one gender, Jerry Trump, and they're like, no, totally. We're totally 100% sure these are the guys, just testify for us. Like, they were even leading some of the other witnesses. And it's just like, they didn't really seem to care about, the justice of the situation. They just wanted this case over and done with, which is kind of mixed up priorities.
Hello, my name is Nicole Farr. I'm a junior mass communications major at Bloomsburg University, and this year I had the chance to have news writing with Professor Santis. And a couple weeks into the class, she showed us a very interesting 48 hours investigation video, which highlighted a young teen in Missouri who was convicted of second-degree murder, Ryan Ferguson. And ever since then, our class has been very interested in getting involved and doing more research on this case. And Professor Santis has been the perfect outlet for that. So Professor Santis, I understand that you have some involvement with this Ryan Ferguson case. What can you tell us about your involvement with the case?
Well, when Chuck and Ryan were arrested, I was an editor, an enterprise editor at the community newspaper where this event took place, this very sad crime. And I went to the trial for several days and sat in on the trial. And before the verdict came in, I just felt that something wasn't right here. It seemed that police, and I had read the police interrogation of Chuck Erickson, it seemed that they were not asking him what happened. It seemed to me they were telling him what happened. And then after the verdict came in, I got to know Ryan Ferguson's father, Bill Ferguson, and we would meet periodically for coffee. I got to know him and his wife, and we would just talk about the case because Bill Ferguson was absolutely determined to get his son out of prison. He thought his son had been wrongfully convicted. So Bill Ferguson felt that his son was not guilty of this crime, but he also felt that Chuck Erickson was not guilty. He felt neither of them was at the crime scene that night, and he thought that Chuck had pleaded guilty to the crime simply because he had been pressured to do that by the police. So the more I got to know about the police interrogation, the case against Chuck and Ryan, the more I came to believe that perhaps they weren't guilty. So Bill Ferguson, I was teaching at the time at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. I had Bill Ferguson come in, talk about the case. I also had the district attorney come in and talk about the case because I wanted to present a balanced account of the case, not taking one side against the other. Mm-hmm. But I will say that almost, I won't say 100%, but certainly 90-some% of the students that I've talked to about this case, and they learn the prosecution side of it, they learn the defense side of it, they really feel there's been a miscarriage of justice here, and they are hopeful that with the new court ruling coming up as soon as perhaps next month, that Ryan will be granted a new trial, since both key witnesses in the case, that would be Chuck Erickson and Jerry Trump, the janitor, have recanted their testimony. Yes, that was the only evidence the prosecution had, because there was no forensic evidence tying either Ryan or Chuck to the murder scene.
Sure. So what is the next step now in this whole process?
Yes, the case is before a Missouri appellate court, and they will decide, those judges on that court will decide whether Ryan gets a new trial. Now, as I understand it, if Ryan is granted a new trial, because he has a new attorney now, that the prosecution might decide, since they can no longer count on Jerry Trump's testimony or Chuck Erickson's testimony, and that was by and large their entire case, the prosecution might decide to drop the charges. That's one possibility. Or if he's granted a new trial, the prosecution might choose, we're going to bring this case again, and then there will be a new trial. But we'll have to wait and see what the court has to say.
Yeah. As new things have been brought into evidence and everything, how do you feel as of right now? Do you think he will get another chance, a second trial? Do you think prosecution, what do you think is going to happen out of all of this?
If I had to guess, I would say there's a very good chance that he'll be granted a new trial. And I think there's also a very good chance that if that's the case, that the prosecution might drop the charges against Ryan.
So after 8 years, spending almost all of his 20s in jail, Ryan Ferguson will be expected to find out what is going to happen in the next step of his life before Thanksgiving, whether he will be retried, sent back to prison, or maybe even the charges will be dropped. So it's just a waiting game now, and we have to wait and see what will happen in the Ryan Ferguson case with the murder of Kent Heitholt.
Ferguson should definitely go free. There's cases like this all over, as Mike said. It's a travesty of justice, and if we can set any precedent by getting Ferguson free, then that's a good thing, and hopefully it'll get us some more justice.